Hi everyone, we're going to be starting in a moment. We're just going to give people a minute or two just to join. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm Emma, I'm the Learning and Engagement Officer at St Albans Museum. I'm really excited to have you here for our second online event. So tonight you're joining us for Automata and the Artists with Sarah Alexander from Cabaret Mechanical Theatre and Sarah Keeling, Curator at St Albans Museum Gallery. It's going to be a really interesting evening. Just before we get started, we're just to let you know, if you haven't been to a webinar like this before, there is a Q&A function at the bottom where you can click on the button that says Q&A. And if you have any questions that you'd like to ask Sarah or Sarah tonight, please do write your questions in there and they'll come to them at the end of the session and have plenty of time to ask them any questions you have. There's also a chat function, which you're probably used to as well, where you can write in any technical issues that you have that I'll be here in the background to be able to help you out with during the talk if there's any kind of issues that you're facing. So please do use both of those. We're looking forward to answering your questions later on, so do write them in. So to start us off, I do want to, first of all, thank you so much for coming and thank you to Sarah and Sarah for being here tonight. But we're going to start by showing you a video that myself and Sarah made in the exhibition. You can see a preview of it behind me. We're so sad not to be able to have you in the exhibition today at the moment. But in the meantime, we thought we would show you a video of the exhibition that Sarah is going to show you around so that you can get a taste of what you can come and see in the museum when we open again. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and show you the video. Sorry, just give me one moment. I think I've not got the correct thing up, which is not helpful with me. I apologise, guys.
Hello, my name is Sarah. I'm Curator of Collections here at St Albans Museum Gallery, and today I am going to be showing you around our Cabaret Mechanical Marvels exhibition. We hope that you're going to be able to visit this exhibition in the Western Gallery one day soon, but while we're in lockdown, I'm going to have to show you it from the other side of the screen. So follow me and we'll have an explore. Welcome to the Western Gallery. The first thing you see when you enter the exhibition is actually part of the St Albans Museum's collection. This is a very tiny fraction of the Salaman tool collection. Raphael Salaman was a man who looked around the world he was in and thought that some crafts were starting to disappear: woodworking, metalworking, leatherworking, sail making, all sorts of things. And so he went around and he collected up tools from all kinds of workshops. And so here what we have from mostly woodworking tools, and also at the end some watchmaking tools, just to show the sorts of things that he was collecting to try and record the history. The reason this collection is here is it's what made us want to work with Cabaret Mechanical Theatre. They create these incredible automata that you're going to see in a moment, but they do it using tools that are very similar to the ones that Salaman collected. And we're really interested in keeping these crafts going and keeping the knowledge of them going. So that's why we put this here at the beginning. But let me show you at least one of the automata to start with. If you come over here. So the first automata that's in the exhibition is this wonderful one called Bearcats by Paul Spooner. All of the automata in this exhibition are by different artists, so there's a whole range of different looks. but this is one of my favourites because Bearcat is the logo for the whole exhibition, so you may have seen him already. We give everyone who comes into the exhibition a pencil, so no touching buttons. And if you see this, you can see Bearcat here working a tiny little automata of himself. So he turns and you can see all of the gears, and that's how you can see exactly how each one of these works. So it's not hidden, but it's all on show, so you can see how the different gears connect and the cams and the axles. But the whole room is full of a lot more automata. If you take a look around, you'll see that it's a full range of different ones that are small and large and have cases. All of them you can press the buttons to turn. There are a few just down here in the middle which turn with a hand as well, so you can have a go with those. And right in the middle of the room we have a space for anyone who comes to visit to have a go at making their own automata. So I know some of you are doing workshops or going to sign up for our workshops, and you'll be able to make these from home, but when you visit the exhibition you also can come and have a go at making an automata yourself. But let's keep going around the exhibition. Automata have existed for thousands of years as soon as people wanted to start making toys that move. But Cabaret Mechanical Theatre, who run this exhibition, were founded in the 1970s. They had a shop in Falmouth at the seaside where you could come and see all of their different moving machines, and then later in the 80s they moved to Covent Garden. And this collection that's in this exhibition, in all their exhibitions, was made up of automata that the different artists made, and they would keep one from each run of automata. So here, right at the end of the gallery, we have some of the older automata and some of the ones that you could buy in their shop, where they've kept one of each one. These ones I'm afraid you can't touch, but I will admit that I did have a little play when I put them all together myself. But there are tiny little trembling hearts, and a submarine that moves, and an arguing couple over there who wag their fingers at each other. So there's a whole range of tiny automata to absolutely massive automata. This incredible thing connects all the way along. And as you can see exactly where each cam and each gear is, so that if you want to visit later, you'll be able to see which different cam makes which different movement. But before we finish, I did just want to show you my personal favourite automata in the exhibition. So this is Baba Yaga, and it was made by Keith Newstead. Keith sadly died last year. It's my favourite partly because it has some sound, and as well as the movement, but also there's something about that wonderful fairy tale nature. So I'm just going to press this and see if you can have a little look. And if you move around the back while I'm holding on to this button, you'll be able to see as well all of the different gears moving that are making it work. There you go. That is Cabaret Mechanical Marvels. As I say, we really hope that you're going to be able to visit later this summer. But if you can't, do keep watching our website. We've got talks and workshops and plenty of chances where we're showing off some of the automata on our social media as well. Thank you.
Great. Okay, I'm going to now pass over to Sarah Alexander, who's going to be telling us more about the automata and the artists.
Hello, good evening. I am so delighted to be here, and it's wonderful to see the exhibition. I haven't actually seen it in real life. We installed the exhibition remotely, so that wasn't what we were planning to do, but it worked really well. And thanks so much, Sarah, for showing us around. I'm going to share my presentation now with you, and we'll learn more. Okay, so Cabaret Mechanical Marvels is the exhibition that's at St Albans at the moment. It was actually supposed to close in a couple of weeks, but we're extending it until June, which is brilliant news. So hopefully people will actually be able to go and see it. The bear cat that Sarah mentioned and showed you is one of the older pieces of automata. And before we go any further, I just wanted to tell you that bear cat is actually an anagram of cabaret, which Paul Spooner told us some years after designing that piece. So he is our logo, and here he is in a new incarnation in Cabaret Mechanical Marvels. So here are the cast for this evening. There are 5 automata makers in this exhibition five automata makers whose work is in this exhibition. We have more makers in our wider collection, but 5 of our sort of best known artists are in this exhibition. That's Ron, Peter, Paul, Carlos and Keith. And Sue Jackson is my mother, was my mother. She died in 2016, and she started Cabaret Mechanical Theatre as just a shop called Cabaret in 1979. She went to art school with Ron Fuller. She was 15 and he was 17, so they got to know each other then. And when she opened Cabaret again later in, a few decades later, she got back in touch with Ron, who was making moving toys, and asked him to bring things for her shop. Peter Markey was the art teacher at our school. So again, a family friend that Sue knew. And Paul, Carlos and Keith joined later. Paul came in Falmouth, but we'll get to those bits as we go on. Right, so the very first shop in Falmouth looked like this. Nothing, no automata to see here at all. This was the first of 2 shops in Falmouth. This one was on the high street, and the window was actually at street level, but the shop itself, you had to go in and go upstairs to go to the shop. And Sue filled it with all sorts of things that people she knew were making, and she commissioned things, and she always wanted it to be things that you couldn't get anywhere else. Why was it called Cabaret? Well, she'd just been to see the Liza Minnelli film and decided that that was the feeling she wanted for the shop. In this picture, she's actually filled the window with an installation by an artist called Maggie Saxby, who made a soft sculpture. But she sold all sorts of things, jumpers, ceramics, and automata. Just on the left here is a harlequin on the front of a catalogue she got very quickly into mail order, and she loved the black and white of this harlequin, and you could buy life-size models to put together made of card. So here's a range of some of the things that were in that catalogue. The jumpers that I mentioned, she had 4 or 5 different local ladies on their knitting machines making jumpers to all sorts of different designs. And in one of her catalogues she wrote, don't worry if you didn't get it, there'll be a new design next Friday. And she kept them very busy, just delivering more and more. So I think that, the thing about the shop was that it was full of unique things and people came back and back. And because we were in Falmouth, a seaside town, it was full of tourists, and they went home and ordered from this catalogue that was sent to them. The pictures in this just here show some of the artefacts that are actually in the St Albans exhibition. That is a ceramic piece by Peter Markey. I mean, that's quite unusual. His wife Beryl was a potter, so she used to glaze and finish his work in her kiln. Ron Fuller always made toys, and this was one of the ones we sold. And this Cabaret Theatre is actually a present to Sue from a friend, Francis Hewlett, who also made work for the shop. He was an artist. this was sent to Sue in 1981, wishing her luck with Cabaret Mechanical Theatre, which was then only a couple of years old. This entertains me. It's the actual insert inside the first mail order catalogue. I just read a bit of it to you, which is quite poignant, I think. She says, as most of you already know, the shop is unique in that everything is homemade. The chances of seeing anything anywhere else is pretty remote. Perhaps after 3 years, this catalogue will become nothing more than an elaborate picture book full of unobtainable objects. She wrote this really early on, and that is exactly what happened later. So this is the interior of the shop. This is actually the interior of the shop 2 doors up the road. She persuaded my father, who ran an antique shop 2 doors up the road, that it would be a good idea to swap premises because she was getting lots of customers and she, as Sarah said, was keeping one each of the automata that the artists were making. And so she did persuade him to swap, and she created the lovely shop, which we can see here. It's got Ron Fuller work, Peter Markey work. These badges she made herself and got painted herself. She made all sorts of things and got everybody making. And she charged 50p to go into the exhibition, which had the first collection of automata. This is Paul Spooner and Sue outside the shop in 1983. Again, you can see here, it's still just called Cabaret, and there are the jumpers that she sold in the background. Peter Markey designed this very specific window piece, and Sue, me and my brother and sister had to paint these. You can't really see them, but we had to paint late at night this collage to go on the window. Paul Spooner made this piece on the right. I hope you can see my mouse, which is called The Last Judgment. And this piece, you could put a 10p coin in from the window and make it work. So that was the first ever coin operated automata. In the exhibition, there were 30 or 40 push button automata of the sort that Sarah has just shown us. This is a very early Peter Markey piece. It's got this little highlight here to remind me that it's actually in the exhibition at St Albans and is the oldest piece in the show. This would have been made when Cabaret was in Falmouth, so around early 1980s to date it. Peter didn't really go in for high class art creation, although he was an art teacher. He used to buy all his paint at Woolworths and mix it up, and he'd use odd scraps of wood. He didn't really care. He just wanted to make something, and he worked very, very quickly. He also not only made small things, but he made enormous backdrops for Cabaret in Falmouth, and this giant dragon he actually made for Falmouth. And then when we moved to Covent Garden, which happened because Sue really had outgrown being in a seasonal town. She knew that if she was in London, she'd have visitors coming all the year round. And she was very gung-ho and just took a lease on a shop in Covent Garden and moved lock, stock and barrel within 11 weeks of seeing the property in Covent Garden. Some of you will have been to Covent Garden. Paul Spooner and Peter Markey drove all the exhibits up in a van. Peter Markey didn't sleep. He just said, oh, I've just had a bath instead of going to bed. And they got on with it. And here's Paul sitting outside Covent Garden writing the sign for the Last Judgment, which we saw in Falmouth. the sign encouraging people to put, probably had gone up to at least 20p by now, maybe 50. And this is a wider view of Cabaret in Covent Garden, and it was now called the Cabaret Mechanical Theatre in order to fill the 4 arches over the property. There's the Last Judgment, and there's also coin-operated machines by Keith Newstead and Tim Hunkin here as well. Those of you who visited will remember this. We stayed there for 16 years, from 1984 until 2000. The entire time it was a financial struggle, but we managed somehow to keep going. And during the time we were there, we actually started touring our exhibitions. The first tours went in Japan in 1993, and a few in the UK before that. This is inside from the shop, the exhibition area. You had to pay to go in, and it was always a struggle to get people to pay, but once they did pay, they brought back their friends and came again and again. This is me and Sue, I'm not quite sure what year, early 90s probably, in front of Tim Hunkin's Auto Frisk. As I say, we lasted there until 2000. And when we left, we started touring exhibitions in earnest, and here are some highlights of exhibitions that we did during that time. Australia, Canberra and Thailand, Spain. It was, and we still continue to do that now, which really helped us to survive in a way. And also we were adding to the collection all the time. So it was a wonderful way of touring the pieces that weren't on show in the shop and adding new artists, which we still continue to do. Sue designed an automata making kit as a response to the way visitors to Cabaret always react. They either want to buy an automata, see the exhibition, of course, but a lot of people actually want to make an automata, and that was true from the very beginning and is still true. And Sue devised several different kits and ways of getting people to make their own. This was a kit that she designed at the end of the Covent Garden years and went into a small production. And a highlight of her, one of our exhibitions in Bangkok was her showing this to the Princess of Thailand. It was an extremely royal event that we were invited to, and the Princess was delighted to see and play with the kit. So we'll start on our artists. As I've said, I'm going to bring them in order of appearance, really. So Ron Fuller was, as I said, at art school with Sue when they were young, and she got back in touch with him when she opened Cabaret. I think she'd seen a picture of one of his chickens laying eggs in a crafts magazine, and she got back in touch with him, and he was delighted to come and make things. He called himself a toy maker, the village toy maker, in fact, and he didn't really think of himself as an automata maker. He made toys and automata, and he made toys for the village children, and the village children helped him make toys. We'll see where he worked in a minute, but this is one of his very early designs, especially for Cabaret. And this actually is Paul Spooner's. He's bought it in the early days and he's holding it here. And it's based on the old pecking hen toy. So if you spin the ball, the legs go up and down rather than the hen pecking. And he's written on it a present from Cabaret, and we sold those in Covent Garden. Here's Ron outside one of his many sheds. He had 3 or 4 different sheds that he worked in, and they were always full of, well, we'll have a look inside in a minute. This is one of his slightly newer sheds. These pictures were actually taken at his funeral, sadly, and he was working right up until the end in 2017. This is inside. He was very, very keen on anything to do with planes, model aeroplanes, flying in a plane. He launched planes and made planes, and he made a lot of toy planes that we sold as well. However much, I mean, I was always amazed at however many sheds he had. There was always a very minimal working space, and this little bit here is where he would actually have worked. Everything else was crowded with materials. Not quite, well, yeah. Okay, this is the three of Ron's actually most memorable and famous pieces. The Sheep Shearing Man. This sheep actually gets revenge on the farmer by cutting his hair for 11 times. And then after 11 times, he actually cuts the farmer's head off, but it resets. The Lion Tamer is in the St Albans exhibition, and that's a similar type of pinwheel action, and the lion is putting his head into the lion tamer is putting his head into the lion's mouth, and he never quite bites it off, which is good. Peter Markey was the art teacher at our school, as I've said, and he started making very simple moving toys that were based on, this is one of his very early pieces. He painted before he made Automata, and he also loved football. This is one of his paintings, his Automata, that looks really like a painting that I can remember seeing of his around that time. So to start with, he was animating his paintings. These are runners or footballers running. And you can see here the paints from Woolworths that he's used, and you can see the simple mechanism. This is another running man. Peter was very, he liked to say that if the wood was square, then the head and the body would be square, because he wasn't so bothered about carving. So he let the shape of the wood determine what the piece was going to be. This is a wave machine of Peter's. He loved the sea and did many different versions of wave machines, which all use a cam mechanism usually, but it's so cleverly done. This one just in plain wood. As he got older, he started making things in plainer wood, and said he wasn't so worried about painting anymore, but still beautiful. This is a peacock. He always made presents for people, and this was something that he made for my mum. It's just sort of lollipop sticks and a lever. Paul Spooner is probably the best known of our artists, and he was born in 1948, and the feature that I think about with Paul is humour, because he is always trying to make a joke. This is the very first Automata that he made for Cabaret, and this piece he actually made in Falmouth. Before he made this, he came into Cabaret with some very simple moving toys and wooden elephants. I've actually got one behind me on the shelf. And Sue thought that he might do well to look at Peter Markey's work and try to do something that moved. So he quite soon came back with 6 of these, and with the day I remember very well. And this was a very new departure, something that we'd never seen before. It's funny, it's Anubis, who became one of Paul's best loved characters, the Lord of the Mummy Wrappings, Egyptian god. And as you can probably read, involved as he was with the questions of preserving and packaging mortal remains, Anubis seems to have hit on a surprisingly modern solution. It's actually a sausage that he's drawing, so he has invented the sausage a long time before anyone else had seen it. So he bought 6 of those in, and Sue kept this one, which we still have in our touring collection. This piece is actually came a couple of years later and is at St Albans. Anubis here, Paul thought he should be disguised this time. He's come to Montmartre in Paris to enjoy some coffee, and he decides that in order to blend in, he's going to dress up in the costume of Baba the elephant, who wore, it was a children's book, he wore giant green suit. So this is Anubis as Baba the elephant. He stirs his coffee and he swats a fly, which just comes up here as he stirs his coffee, sometimes called the fly swatter or Anubis in Montmartre. This is Paul's shed in Cornwall, where he lives and works, the outside. And this is the inside. I was thinking about this when Sarah shared the pictures of the Salaman collection with us. Paul tells me that during lockdown, he tidied this shed for the first time in 40 years. I haven't seen it since it's been tidied, but this was always what Paul's shed looked like. If you just have a look at the figure drawing up there, we'll come to that again now. And this was the basis for another early piece, which is also in the exhibition at St Albans, which was based on this painting by Manet, Manet's Olympia. This is Paul's version of Manet's Olympia, and sold an edition of 12 in Falmouth and also an edition of 12 in London very quickly. And in this scenario, the lovely lady is actually in the pharaoh's harem, and this Anubis is trying to keep her awake with some camp coffee, and because she's so beautiful, he shakes his tray every time he comes close to her. This piece is also at St Albans, and this is called The Flight into Egypt. And again, this was made just when we moved to Covent Garden. It's a very simple piece. The timing, the flight, the timing is all based on the size of the can. So if you get to see the exhibition, you'll see the mechanism for this wonderful piece. Paul sketches every day. He can't, he always does, and he can't ever make as many ideas as he's put in his sketchbook. And here's just a couple of pages of examples. So he'll do bits of mechanisms, bits of just details. I mean, none of these are recognizable to me as pieces he's finished. So they'll just be ideas that he might incorporate. And he often has, well, there's a bit of calculation here. Sometimes he'll write a note about ringing someone up or somebody's phone number. Very, very entertaining. This one I like. It's something called, again, I'm not sure what it is, the Rapture Ready Chicken, and a whole tableau of automata here, including one I do recognise, which was an odd one, which was called the Elephant with a Nosebleed. And this scenario is entitled The World, but it's Paul's musings and thinking about what he's going to do. You can see here he's got mechanisms that he's going to try. So, yeah. Okay. When I press the button, we're going to see a film about Paul that is shown in the exhibition. It's 3 or 4 minutes long, and it says Curious Contraptions. It was made for an exhibition at the Exploratorium, but we're going to hear Paul 4 or 5 years ago talking from his workshop. So this should work.
The classic joke for me is a mousetrap. Set the mousetrap, put the bait there, the mouse comes along, bingo, and that's what I'm up to. I want to set up an expectation and then spring it, and with a bit of luck, they'll get the joke and they'll like it and they'll laugh, or they'll be repelled by it. So I tend, and always have tended, to try and find a way round the problem of not being clever by trying to be funny. So I do tend to make a joke of things rather than amaze people by my spectacular mechanical skills. I'd like people to get hold of the idea that it's the ideas that count rather than the sort of splendour of the machinery. Automata, technically it is a thing that works itself, because auto means itself and matos means moving. So it's a thing that moves apparently of its own accord, but of course we know that they don't move of their own accord, they move because of some force working them. I'll think of something, usually in the shower, and leap out of the shower and draw. And then I'll come into my shed and make things. The process is generally thinking, drawing, making, failing. The thing about making machines is that ultimately everything is a failure. Every single thing I make. I mean, I've said this before and I'm saying it now. The only thing you can be sure of with a machine is that one day it's going to break. I mean, I almost daily get people ringing up saying, you know, that thing you made in 1982, it's broken. I hate it, can I have a new one? I'm a 20th century person, which I've been accused of recently, actually. I was written up as a 20th century person. I was born in the 20th century, but I'm planning to die in the 21st, so, you know, as late as possible. But I will figure out how to work a phone one of these days. I think that people who do art are kind of witnesses. I think that it's a process of bearing witness to what it's like being you in your situation. It's a good idea to try to describe what the world seems like from your point of view. And to me, it largely seems tragically funny.
Would you tell us about what you think is funny? Everything.
Yeah, well, I think, seriously, what I think is funny is, well, this is funny. This is funny. I think that there's a funny side to nearly everything, no matter how horrible it might be. I think baths are funny. I think pogo sticks are funny. I mean, I think pullovers are funny, but not as funny as cardigans. Funny is brilliant, and to be funny is the best possible thing for me. I can't be hugely kind. I don't have many of the sort of attributes that society considers to be worthwhile. But if I can be funny, then that's as good as it gets for me. And to hear people laughing at my work is enormously rewarding.
Okay, during that film, Paul was actually making a piece which is called Mozart's Goat, and you might have seen that head, but I might be able to. Yes, you should see that video. Again, showing Paul's sense of humour and wit in a very simple machine. This piece is called Cat Rabbit, which is very, very recent. We sold this one last week, and I just thought I would quickly share this with you. And a piece that he showed in the film is little Reinhardt's wonderful sausage machine, which really is a kind of cautionary tale, if you like, which hints at what Paul is actually doing now. He, as he says here, he's currently working on an exhibit for a German museum about the dangers of wasting planetary resources. He's been working on this all of last year and hoping to install it at a new centre in southern Germany later this year. And he's having great fun with this subject. It's really cautionary tales about wasting resources and not using water properly, buying too many toys. In the left-hand side, we see a boy that has flooded his yard because they've concreted it over and he's now drowning. And this girl has unfortunately had so many toys that they've all fallen out of the attic onto her head. Here are the houses waiting to be put onto motors and sent to Germany later this year. This is another scene from not enough room in his workshop, so in the dining room for all the houses. Carlos Sabata came to Cabaret in just at the end of the 90s, very late on, 1998. And Sue actually persuaded him to come and work behind the counter, and also she encouraged him to make his pieces. He made very small pieces to start with, and his always more sculptural and tribal in a way. His carving is fantastic, and he now works in much a larger scale, but he's sometimes very minimal with the mechanical side of it. As you can see in this chameleon piece here, it's almost just a sculpture, but when you turn that very obvious handle, the eyes blink, the mouth moves, and the chameleon goes up and down. Carlos very, very keen on bright colours, and his workshop is completely full of paint. This was taken in 4 or 5 years ago. And this piece is actually in the exhibition, and Carlos made a piece of Paul Spooner, and this is Paul Spooner thinking about what he's going to design. He's got a pencil in one hand, and when you turn the handle, you can see that he's designing a bear cat on his chest. So that's in St Albans. He makes very detailed, small, like as we can see here, this small foot as well as larger scale. These pieces are from a work called The Mermaid of Zena, which he made for our touring collection 5 or 6 years ago. A fairy tale which has an artist making automata and the children watching the show The Mermaid of Zena, and the mermaid swimming along underneath. This is quite a large piece with a small piece on it. Carlos often used lots of small figures within larger pieces. And he also likes themes of the ecological, if you like. This one's called Extinction is Forever, and the man on the roof is holding the last dodo in his hands. Keith Newstead, the last artist that we'll came to Covent Garden in, we're trying to work it out. He sadly died at the end of last year in November, which was a big shock to the whole community, really. And we've been talking a lot, and I realised only recently that he'd actually been to Cabaret for several years before he came and said hello to my mum and showed her some automata that he'd been making. And that was he probably came in during the late 80s, but he actually made himself known in the early 90s. His workshop is very, very neat and tidy, actually Concha, his wife, still works in this space and makes Keith's designs, which is lovely. He also collected pieces from the beach and made these very colourful sculptures. Colour again was very important in Keith's work. He did fantastic drawings. He was an illustrator first, in a way, and these are drawings on the side of his fridge in his studio. The Economic Cycle was a piece that he made in Covent Garden, which showed the tale of the financial struggles of a small business. Sue and Keith are actually in the back of a small business vehicle, the bank managers tantalising them with money, and the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the Prime Minister are the blind, leading the blind in rose-tinted spectacles, going the opposite way to the road of recovery. The bank manager's shoes were, Sue used to phone the shop if she was coming in late and say, "Are the bank manager's shoes in the safe?" Meaning the shoes she wore when she was meeting the bank manager in yet another meeting. So that's Keith. That he made countless donations boxes. This is one that he'd made for a library a few years ago. And many people will see them around the country in museums and all sorts of places, cheese shops and galleries. This is the drawing for the piece that Sarah showed earlier, the lovely Baba Yaga. This was a drawing he did. This is the piece, which, as we know, is in the exhibition. Rather abruptly, sorry, I'm going to tell you that was the last piece about an artist in the exhibition. And sorry to move that slide on so quickly, but I'm aware of the time and I have come towards the end of the talk. So I just wanted to say, as I said at the beginning, that we installed the exhibition remotely and with Sarah and her team's help. And we also are running workshops with St Albans Museum to do make your own automata at home as people can't come in. And we've been trying these exhibitions over the last 6 months or so, and it's been wonderful to get a whole community of artists and people working together from all around the world and sharing their designs. It's so clever. You can share what you're doing and interact with people without being in an actual workshop. So my last slide says a new piece of news, which is a workspace which will be on the south coast of England. And we'll be making more announcements soon, but it means that after 20 years, we will have a place to have our automata collection, work on it and welcome visitors to see exhibitions and come to in-person workshops. So that is it. Thank you for joining us. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Sarah. I think it's my turn to take over now. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Salaman collection and why we invited Cabaret Mechanical Theatre to come and exhibit with us. So I'm just going to share my presentation. Here we go. So my name's Sarah. I'm the curator at St Albans Museum Gallery, and we have a huge range of collections, but one of the collections that we have that actually is one of the biggest collections we have is the Salaman tool collection. Raphael Salaman lived from 1906 to 1993, and he was a collector of tools. And when I say a collector of tools, I mean every kind of tool under the sun, that he was interested in everything. He really was a collector. He was a person who just wanted to bring as many things together as he could. Particularly, he was interested in protecting the tools and the crafts and the trades that were starting to disappear after the Second World War. So we have this collection that he put together, and he worked very closely with St Albans Museums in its various iterations in the past. So this poster here is from 1948 and an exhibition that he put on in the old museum on the Hatfield Road site about Old English tools, as it says there. After this exhibition, he kept in contact with the museum and kept working with us. And eventually in 1970s, his collection came to the museum, so it's part of our permanent collection now. When it came in, they estimated that it was about 3,300 tools. It's an estimate, and I actually still can't give you an exact number because there are all sorts of wonderful details to it, like a box full of chisels where it's not entirely clear whether each chisel has been separately counted or the whole box together. So there are several thousand tools. And this is one of our key collections. And I'm always looking for ways that we can bring the tools out, but also that we can share them in a way that says something new or really connects to people. And the thing that I love about the Cabaret Mechanical Theatre collections is that you can see how they've been made. You can really see how those pieces have been carved and how all of the mechanics works because it's all on display. So it felt to me when I knew about this touring exhibition that it would be a really nice chance to talk about some of the tools and some of those crafts that Salaman was trying to protect alongside the amazing ideas and imagination and craft of the Cabaret Mechanical Theatre artists. And I have to admit that I am one of those people who went to the Covent Garden shop. It's something I remember as a child. So I was also really excited to bring that to St Albans as well. But to go back a little bit, let me see if I can. Sorry, my slides are just, there we go. The Salaman tool collection, as I say, came to St Albans in its entirety in the 1970s. Well, not in its entirety, the part of it that came to us, which was the vast majority of his tools. And it was on display in the old museum on Hatfield Road, Museum of St Albans, as it was towards the end of its life. And a number of you, if you're local St Albans residents, may well remember these displays. On one side here, we have the saw pit, which was set up with this enormous, to show you the full size of a saw in a saw pit and how that worked going from the top to the bottom. And then there were also displays that did change a little bit over time, but generally stayed fairly static, that showed you the wide range of tools. Here I've shown planes. All of these planes are also on display in Cabaret Mechanical Marvels. Not quite laid out like that, but they are the same tools that I've used in the exhibition today. When they were on display in the museum, they also had recorded commentary alongside them, and they had information from Salaman about the different tools. They recreated workshops, so as you can see the saw pit here, but also a blacksmith and a wheelwrights, so that you could see how those tools were used in the spaces. The Salaman collection was redisplayed from this display in 1992, and it took up most of the ground floor of the museum, and it was on display there until 2010. Obviously, taking up the whole ground floor of the museum meant that there was a lot that couldn't be done in that space. So at that point, it was taken off display. And then, as many of you will know, we moved to the new museum opening in 2018. And we haven't had the whole collection on display since we've moved, but we have had bits of it out on display and used it in a variety of ways, which I'm going to talk about towards the end of this talk. But to talk about the collection itself, the Salaman tool collection doesn't just contain tools. It does contain over 3,000 tools, as I say, but it also includes photographs like these that show people working in their actual workshops where the tools have come from. It includes some recordings of workmen talking about their crafts and talking about their tools. And Salaman was also really keen to collect the folklore and the stories that workmen had. So he would write down notes and anecdotes, as well as the details about the tools. He would write down things that told you about the people who'd actually used them. And so lots of these photographs are really full of character, and I always kind of want to go in and start talking to these people and finding out exactly what their stories are. He started his collection formally in 1946, and that's when he started with the photographs, and he had big day books that he would list out and had his own numbering system of exactly where he collected things from. But he would tell a story that the first tool he collected was in 1935, and so I'm going to read this in his own words. One of the unfortunate unemployed, he had walked from Yorkshire in search of work, came to the small engineering works in the Old Kent Road, where I was a manager. The gatekeeper told me that the man had some tools to sell. They had belonged to his grandfather. As soon as I saw a pair of Lancashire springbow calipers, which I bought, I had become a tool collector. He did also manage to get that man some work in the in the firm that he was in at the time, but that was his first purchase. And after that, he kept collecting tools. During the Second World War, he became particularly aware that some of the social changes that were happening were accelerating changes in agriculture and in some of these trades, like wheelwrights and woodworking. And he wanted to protect that knowledge and those tools. So he would collect tools from bombed out barns where the tools had been abandoned and no one wanted them anymore. He would go around and he would collect up those. And he also, he grew up in Barley in Hertfordshire, and he collected tools from some of the tradespeople there as well. So there was someone called George Casaubon who was a wheelwright, and a lot of his tools, a lot of the wheelwright tools we have are from George Casaubon, but Salaman collected a plane, a rounding plane from there, because he realized that a lot of the old wooden tools were actually being chopped up, and he says that he found bits of the handles were being used to smoke hams in the saw pit, and he was so horrified by the idea of these beautiful tools disappearing that he wanted to collect them all up. So he'd already started that process, and then in 1946 he started to do it in a much more systematic way. He actually worked for Marks and Spencer's, and he was a traveling salesman, so it meant he traveled all over the country. So although the majority of the collection does have a connection to Hertfordshire, huge amounts of it don't. We have objects from all over the country. And when you look through his notebooks, you can see this really wide range of tools and places and different skills that he collected. So I chose this one because we have woodworking tools in the exhibition, because woodwork is such a big part of the Cabaret Mechanical Theatre. When I was searching for tools to put in the exhibition and photographs to put in the exhibition, I found this photograph, which is of a plane maker. So this is not someone using a plane. This is the person who made the planes which shave the wood flat. This is a plane maker's tool bench. And then the other picture here, you have the end of several planes, and you can see the stamps of all of the names of the owners. So sometimes Salaman would collect from one specific person, and sometimes he would go to a workshop and he would just, the art had been abandoned, and collect everything up. But a lot of the tools have multiple names on them. These are things that were used by real people and repeatedly used, and sometimes you can see repairs on them. And almost always you can see the mark of the hands and where they've been worn smooth. And they have this really amazing quality that when you look at them, you just want to touch them, and you imagine all of those different names and those different people who held them over the years. He actually collected from about 400 different workshops and tradesmen. And he collected the tools, as I say, the photographs, their recollections, and also catalogues. And what he set out to do was to create a set of dictionaries of tools. He wanted, so he said for his first dictionary, which was woodworking, he said he wanted to describe every tool used in the woodworking trades from about 1700 to the present time, and to explain its purpose, to give the reader some idea of the graceful shapes imparted to the tools by the men who designed and made them, and to record some of the methods and sayings of the tradesmen who used them. So he made his woodworking dictionary, which is an amazing thing. And as somebody who doesn't use a lot of tools, but does have to identify tools when working with the Salaman collection, it is incredibly useful and detailed, with a lot of illustrations and lots of information, so that, you know, it goes on for pages and pages about planes. I think I worked out it was about 100 pages of just planes and all of the different types in there. He also wrote the dictionary of leatherworking. And he planned to create a dictionary of metalworking and one of engineering tools, but unfortunately he was forced to retire through ill health, so we only have the first two of those. But we do have a lot of metalworking and engineering tools and lots of his notes that he made along the way. By 1975, when he'd retired and he'd stopped collecting, he was able to say that he had visited, as I say, about 400 tradesmen, and he made an estimate. I'm going to read this out to you of the different people he'd collected from. He believed that he had collected from 86 smiths and farriers, from 62 wheelwrights, from 40 carpenters and joiners, from 33 specialist woodworkers, such as shipwrights, millwrights, furniture makers, coach builders, hurdle makers, and coopers, from 39 leather workers, including tanners, curriers, shoemakers, machine belt makers, saddlers, and glove makers. And then on top of that, he had also collected from basket makers, sail makers, farm workers, horsemen, plumbers, builders, and watchmakers. So the other tools that we have in Cabaret Mechanical Marvels, if you're able to visit, are watchmaking tools, because these are the tiny tools that had to be used on the clockwork. So when I'd seen all of the clockwork that was going to be coming from Cabaret Mechanical Theatre, a watchmaker seemed like a perfect example. So we have woodworking tools and then we have watchmaking tools. But as I hope you can tell, that's a huge range of different skills, trades, types of tools, sizes of tools. The largest plane that we have in our collection is over 1.5 meters long. It's about 6 feet long. The smallest plane in our collection is about 10 centimeters long. Again, both of those are on display. So you can imagine just the scale of this collection and the different things that we can look at in it, the different trades that we can talk about and the different things along the practicalities of how a tool works, or who has owned a tool, or as Salaman himself said, that graceful shape. There's something really beautiful about the shapes, and particularly when they have wooden handles, and you can really feel that. So as I said, we don't have the full collection on display because it is so huge. And whilst I know that there are some people who would love to spend days and days going through every tool in it, unfortunately, that isn't quite the case for every visitor. So we've started to try and come up with more imaginative ways to use the tools. These are a very few pictures of some of the things that I've done since I started working at St Albans Museum, which was before the museum and gallery opened, actually. So in the top left-hand corner here, you can see some product design students from the University of Hertfordshire. They are designing all sorts of products, but they have now for several years worked with us to look at some of the historic design in our collection and to think about how what they can learn going forwards and putting that into product design in the future. So in 2016, we took some of the Salaman agricultural tools in, and as you can see, the students looking at them here, and they picked them up and they felt them, and they felt the weight of a scythe and how that works and how the handles. And I think a lot of them talked about the fact that they could tell that these were personal tools. You could really see how they were made for the hands that were going to use them. So that was a really interesting way to bring them out and to bring them to a group who probably never would have come to see them in the museum. Then in 2017, we worked with an artist called late 2016, we started working with her actually, just in the autumn, winter of 2016, Katie Gillam-Hull. And she did a project called Rescued, Retained, Revered. So the bottom two pictures and the central picture were all by related to Katie Gillam-Hull. She was really interested in that concept of a hand holding a tool and how we remember tools and the shapes of them and the beauty of them alongside their practical use. So what she first did was she chose a selection of tools and we took them out into the community. So you can see in the bottom left-hand corner there, we took them to home base in St Albans and talked to the staff about them. Do they recognise what they were? How would you hold them? Have you seen anything like this? And we talked to all the people who were coming along on a Saturday to do their DIY, to look at some of the historic tools and to see the similarities and differences with the tools on sale. And then in the bottom right there, we have the de Havilland Museum. And we went along to the de Havilland Museum and had an amazing day with the volunteers there who were working on their planes, restoring the planes. And that was a completely different experience, because what happened there was we put the tools out and they came and they looked at them and they touched them, and then they went away and fetched almost identical tools that they were still using today on their projects, and would compare them and show us how they worked. But we also took them into Verulamium Museum down in the park, and we had them in the clock tower. So we had lots of places that they went to so that people could try them out. And then when we opened the new museum and gallery in town in 2018, Katie Gillam-Hull was part of a group of artists who did an exhibition called Accumulate, inspired by our collections. And that photograph in the middle is a mixture of real Salaman tools, chisels and photographs and things from the Salaman collection, and then Katie's own artworks, where she made these beautiful wire, I don't quite know how to say them, but the shapes, they're the shape of each tool out of wire. And she also made some of them out of pieces of copper. etched with words that Salaman had said. And so it was really lovely to see how in depth she got into each of those objects and the real physical nature of the object. The last photograph there is from our Barbara Hepworth late. So when we had Barbara Hepworth sculpture on display, we did an evening opening and we brought out some of the more sculptural tools and the sorts of things that we knew that Barbara Hepworth had in her studio. Again, just to kind of make that real connection between the tool and the thing that it made. And that's exactly what I've been trying to do with the Cabaret Mechanical Theatre. And it was wonderful working with Sarah Alexander and her team to bring the Salaman tools into that space where we also have these incredible automata that have been made by people, and you can watch the videos showing how those people put the objects together. It was a really brief overview there. The collection is huge and I could talk about it for a whole evening, but that was what I just wanted to give you a little bit of an idea about why we wanted to connect these two things together. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sarah. It's fascinating, for both Sarahs, in fact. So we've just got a bit of time now to answer some people's questions. If you still have any questions you want to send in, please do feel free to put them in the Q&A box. But we've had a few come through that I'm going to read out, and Sarah can respond. So our first question is, thank you for the webinar. I'm trying to create these experiences for kids to make their own, presumably automata, and wanted to ask you all, what things should I consider in designing this? Thank you. I think that's for Alexander.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Okay, lots of things to consider. We take quite a tinkering approach with teaching automata making at Cabaret, but we do use some very simple cardboard kits that you can see actually on the table in the photograph behind Emma there, which are a very good, and the other side, a very good starting point. They're not actually available for sale on our shop, but we can supply these if people want them. In fact, there's lots of different ways that we can give you sort of resources and hints, and I'd be happy if you want to email me about that. As I've said, we've been running online workshops, and we're just starting to run online workshops with schools and colleges where the children are still in lockdown at home, certainly at the college, and we're sending kits out to them and they're able to work with our facilitators and their teacher. So we've got lots of experience about that we can also pass on. We quite like using very easily obtainable materials if people can't have kits sent, just cardboard and very, very food packaging, that kind of thing. So there's lots that we can help you with, and I'd be happy to talk to you more about it.
Well, thank you, Sarah. The next question is anyone carrying on the art automaton tradition but updating it with newer technologies, 3D printing, laser cutting, electronics, etc.? Witty and charming, sure, but also modern tech. Fascinating question.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Obviously, the artists that I've shared with you today are very traditional. There are certainly lots of people out there making things using electronics and laser cutting parts. One of our artists who doesn't have work in this exhibition is called Martin Smith. He works in Huddersfield in the UK, and he uses a lot of laser cut parts, and he has a laser cutter and he does 3D printing. We're actually also designing a kit ourselves, which is laser cut and a kit of parts. But in terms of artists, I think there are artists coming, younger artists, who are using a mixture of both what I would call traditional technology and the newer devices. So yes, they will come.
Wonderful. The next question is, which I think you kind of mentioned towards the end, is there a shop now in the UK or a permanent expo? It sounds like you've got some plans.
Well, we've got that in hand, COVID and Brexit and everything allowing. There'll be more news about that, but we should be actually having a place where people can visit the collection and buy things in a shop. So yes.
Where will that be?
It's in Bexhill-on-Sea, which is in south coast of the UK, in East Sussex.
Oh,
so
beautiful.
We're working with the local council and people on that at the minute. So hopefully we'll be there by the autumn, but people can watch our website, join our mailing list, and we'll keep you updated. And we'll obviously run in-person workshops there once we get that up and running and people can come out again. So that will be good.
Fascinating, that's great. I think we've already mentioned things to do with the DIY kits that they're actually, just to answer that if you want to get an automata making kit, when we open again the exhibition at St Albans Museum and Gallery, everyone who comes can get a kit when they come along, which is very exciting. So do come and take advantage of that when that's possible. Can you buy Salaman's Dictionary of Woodworking Tools?
Yes, you can. It's not, I believe, in print currently, but if you look online, there are quite often copies of it secondhand available because it's gone through quite a lot of editions. So yeah, both the woodworking and the leatherworking dictionaries are available if you look for them. Emma, you're muted.
Sorry, everyone. That it was a fab and aspirational exhibition, so thank you to Kate for that. From David, it was such a shock to lose Keith Newstead last year. He leaves behind a fantastic automata legacy. Are there any plans for Keith Newstead exhibition of some of his work?
There's talk. We would like to do something, and also our friends at the Falmouth Art Gallery have a big collection of Keith's work. So there are plans. It probably won't be until next year at the earliest to have some proper celebration. But he had a very small funeral, and you know, I couldn't get to it, so a lot of people are waiting to go and sort of say goodbye properly. And I know that Falmouth Art Gallery, where he lived, have a big collection that they would like to share, so that will happen, but there isn't an actual date yet, but it will certainly happen when we can all get back out. Yeah.
Is Curious Contraptions going to return to the Exploratorium? Say hello to Sarah to me. I don't know which Sarah that is.
That's me. Hello, Erin. Erin's over in the USA, I think. And no, not actually, Erin. We did a run of 3 or 4 Curious Contraptions with Exploratorium, and that came to an end. We are having an exhibition hopefully later this year in San Diego in California, so that's as near as we can get to you for the moment.
Great. And I think a last question, are there any tours planned for North East England? So I guess is the
North East England. Not right yet. We have previously, but not upcoming. Again, I'd encourage people to join our mailing list, and we update when exhibitions are touring. The Cabaret Mechanical Marvels exhibition will tour to Dorset and Oxfordshire, but later this year, but not North East England at the moment.
Fair enough. Well, thank you so much, both Sarahs, for answering such interesting questions, and thank you everyone for sending in your questions. Sorry I haven't managed to get to all of them, but we're getting towards the end of our time. Just before we finish, I just want to share with everyone a little bit about some of our upcoming online. Sorry, I'm losing my thing. Our upcoming online exhibition on events. Sorry, I'm having difficulty with my screen. So we've got 2 more online talks coming up very soon. So we've got a talk on what does it mean to belong, which is connected to our upcoming exhibition about the local Jewish community and their journeys, which should be fascinating. And it's going to be introduced by the Lord Lieutenant of Hertfordshire, which should be wonderful, who also will be sharing a little bit about his personal family story as well. We've also got a talk coming up about Handley Page, which I know is a place that's a company that's of great local importance for a lot of people, talking about the planes that they made. And also I wanted to again draw attention to the fact that we're very excited to have the exhibition of Cabaret Mechanical Marvels continuing at St Albans Museum and Gallery until June. So as soon as we're open, please do come and see the exhibition in the flesh. So you can have an automata kit that you can press the buttons and see all of the automata working in person, because that's the real experience. So yes, thank you so much everyone for coming. After I close the webinar, you're going to be invited to do a survey. I'd really appreciate it if you could fill that in, just because it helps us to understand how you found tonight and what other online programming you'd be interested in. So thank you again so much for coming. Thank you so much to Sarah from Mechanical Marvels, and thank you so much, Cabaret Mechanical Marvels, and thank you for Sarah from St Albans Museum, and thank you all for coming. Bye everyone, have a nice evening.